And we're live, virtually connecting at Amical 2019 in Cairo, Egypt at the American University in Cairo. My name's Joe Murphy. I'm the director of the Center for Innovative Pedagogy at Kenyon College in Gambira, Ohio. And I'm your virtual buddy for this session. Let's introduce our other participants. Ken?
So I'll do it on live this time. Ken Bauer, Associate Professor, Rabble Rouser at the Tecnológico de Monterrey in Guadalajara. I'm so happy to see Robin there in Cairo.
Hi, everyone. My name is Regina Gong. I'm the OER Project Manager at Lansing Community College in Michigan, and so happy to see you. I think this is my first virtually connecting for this year. So I only do twice a year. So nice to see you all. Hattie?
Terry, Hattie, say hi.
Yeah.
So you're unmuted, but we can't hear a thing. Probably Hattie unplugged the...
Okay, well, we have Terry and Hattie in Ontario. Terry Green is with us, and we'll fix his audio questions or text us things to contribute. And on-site folks, would you please introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Anita Walls. I'm from Virginia Tech, where I'm the Open Education, Copyright, and Scholarly Communication Librarian.
I'm Robin DeRosa from New Hampshire in the US, and I am the Director of the Open Learning and Teaching Collaborative.
And I'm Cheryl Hodgkinson-Williams from the University of Cape Town, and I specialize in my research in open education resources. And we've been contributing to a whole bunch of conversations on open education at this conference, amongst other things, yes. But particularly on open.
You're also the OER UNESCO chair.
Oh, yes.
For social justice and open education.
And I've been reminded, I've just recently become a UNESCO chair. In fact, it's the only one in open education and social justice. So I've really put myself out there in terms of social justice. I'm learning every day what that means.
And I'm Mahab Ali. I am here at AUC, and I'm the co-director of Virtually Connecting.
And Nadine.
Hi, guys. I'm Nadine. I'm on-site buddy here. I'm from AUC.
Hi.
Well, yeah, I was going to ask. I'm used to being virtual. So.
I'm used to being virtual. That's a funny statement.
I used to not having been at the conference. I was like, how's the conference been going so far? Like I've been with them every day, but...
Well, that was my question. So I'd love to hear more about those conversations and connections that you're all making. What are you learning?
Well, perhaps, Anita, you started first. So maybe we can build up to Robin's absolutely splendid presentation today.
I think she just
I have to go first. I've never been on VConnecting before.
On this side of the room.
On this side. So I've had a number of conversations with people that are fairly, that are asking questions about the incentives for and rewards for them for engaging with use and creation of open educational resources. I've also had a lot of questions about technical details of Creative Commons licenses. How do those differentiate? What is where do I find open educational resources? So I think there are a lot of different levels of knowledge here. Yeah, I think it will be challenging to get the word out to let folks know. Here's a whole collection of places where you can start looking to see what already exists and what you can either adapt or what you can use. I really loved Cheryl's work. I attended both of Cheryl's workshops on I guess, intro and sort of advanced issues related to economic, political, social impacts, access impacts related to OER. So I think a lot of folks are really interested, and there's good potential for collaboration between institutions because all of these people get together every year, and this is a long-term, I believe that this is a long-term direction for the consortium.
I'm glad you mentioned that in terms of the social justice issues, because I think a lot of the research, a lot of the discussion around the value of open education resources has centered around the economic dimension. It's going to be cheaper. But in fact, I think in terms of social justice, we've got a far stronger cultural and political issue to raise for people. Because in fact, otherwise we are perhaps unwittingly reinforcing a certain knowledge base, certain perspectives, and we may not be hearing the other voices who are really clamoring to be heard, but just don't yet have the right to have a voice yet. So I think discussion around whose knowledge is being privileged, whose perspectives are you taking, how many different variations are you actually including? I think that seemed to resonate a lot for people, but it almost came as a bit of a surprise. I think most people are used to it. It's got to be cheaper. That was the main issue. So I think we did quite a bit of discussion around the cultural issues and whose knowledge is being privileged in OER. So, and what OER can do unwittingly. So I think that was really helpful. And I've had many subsequent conversations with people, and I think most of them have been around, so how do we do this practically? How do we, so from very ordinary things like you mentioned, where do we find OER? How do we know it's an OER? To the more difficult questions about how do we actually encourage people to develop OER when, for example, they're on short-term contracts. So there's no longer-term incentive. And this is becoming a worldwide problem. It's not just in Amical. So, but it was raised again just at the very last session before we met up with you. So the precariat, which I think we've got to think about how we're going to deal with people who are on these short-term contracts. You know, how can we support them? So I think perhaps that leads into some of the issues that you raised in your presentation this morning. And I must tell you, Robin had the most amazing way of giving the audience an opportunity to choose what she would like, what we would like her to focus on. She had mostly except the last one. But, she prepared a whole series of kind of mini input sessions with a series of kind of questions for consideration. And then we were allowed to say, we want to hear that one first. So I love the fact it was called an unkeynote.
Yeah. So thank you for that, because I am jet lagged, and it was nice that someone else explained that. But I also just want to say it's very interesting to me because this conference is very inflected by open, probably maybe a little bit because of our friends who have putting some of it together. But I just want to say I used to be very grateful to kind of coming of age in open through the Open Ed conference. And in some ways I still am very grateful because I learned so many things, and now I feel like I'm doing really interesting work. So that's great. But to be honest, in the last year, since I've been doing more work internationally, I've come to really appreciate coming at open from an international perspective. And I'm thinking now, as I'm leading a university and a team that's much newer to open, the first thing I thought is, well, I'll take them to Open Ed, you know, and they'll get all those sort of like basic intro panels. And I was like, really? I wonder if instead a better way to do this is to early on enter the more international conversations.
OE Global Creative Commons?
Correct.
Even OER 19 is quite.
OER
That's
19 is
right.
quite-
And I feel like there's much more of a social justice inflection
Yes.
in those communities, which I mean, all of my own work in terms of my own institution and my own teaching is in the US, but that perspective has really been helpful to me. And so anyway, it's one of the things I've really appreciated, you know, in this context is mostly just hearing other perspectives because it changes the way I think about open. The other thing is it's my first time in Africa, my first time in Egypt, my first time meeting Maha, and I'm just like, you know, there is a certain irony for me that in doing this work, I've had a chance to like travel in ways that I never would have before. But I am so grateful for being here because Egypt is spectacularly warm so far, and
Warm as in the people, because the
Warm.
weather is actually quite cool.
Yeah, maybe not so much.
cold today.
People are wearing parkas because I think it's like 65 or something.
There was 1 hour of sunshine, 1 hour of sunshine. You'll see the pictures from that, but that was the only hour of sunshine all day today.
I'm like,
It's
tropical. It's beautiful.
Now Terry got 10 centimeters of snow last night, so I'm sure he feels great kinship.
I would say come, and I really would like to come back with my family. We haven't even we're going to do more of like a touring around tomorrow, but for me that's been one of the really exciting parts of the conference was getting to come here and visit. It's just beyond. So,
And you haven't mentioned the food. The food is divine. So no scale needed. You just need to eat, and then later on you don't have to worry about the weight you put on.
So nice when we hear other people talk about Egypt this way, right?
Yeah.
How do you feel about Egypt? I mean, it's nice. It's a fresh perspective.
That's why we bring people all the time. Okay, do you guys have any comments, questions? Hunger?
Yeah, I actually have. So I just had a chance to take a look at your keynote, Robin. And yeah, Cheryl mentioned the unkeynote portion. So you ask the audience, how do we build a university of the margins? How's the response?
well, the questions were far. Like there was no expectation that I would say, how do you build a university of the margins? And someone would raise their hand. I can't tell you. So what I tried to do was just provide 3 feedback channels. And actually some people have been using Hypothesis as well. I didn't put that up there because on my blog, it only loads on the posts and not the pages. And I didn't want people who don't know about it to get feeling like they were excluded. But besides Hypothesis, I had a Google Doc. I put out my email, and then we had a hashtag. So really what I was doing was seeding the questions and then hoping maybe you'd put a little tweet or a quick little reaction, but you might come back later with a little bit more. And I think over the next really probably 2 months or so, I'll just take anything that comes in and try to weave it in various places. You know, if we had endless time, it would have been nice to really kind of sit and pair with each other. As it was, we only did a small fraction of the parts of the keynote, which
I was telling Robin she prepared for 1 keynote, but you could give like 3 more keynotes out of it because there were like...
Hire me now, folks. I got keynote to spare.
You can already see everything that's happening, and then you get to choose which ones you want her to say out loud, right?
But it was such a part of what I wanted to do also, just in terms of people who are new to open, was like for me, one of the biggest things about open in my courses is really troubling the endpoint of the course, right? To think that one of the first things I started doing in open was giving an assignment at the end of the course that would never get turned in, which back when I first started doing it, I thought was like the most transgressive and exciting thing I'd ever done in my life, you know? But just that sense of sort of not letting the container contain the learning, right? But letting the learning move with the learners. And so I like the fact that there's a lot more keynote left, you know, for people to take away with them. I actually think there's also a whole other one that I forgot to publish that goes in there, because somebody says like this morning, I was like, oh my gosh, I wrote this whole thing about like assessment. And then I was like, where did that go? That must have been in the jet lag haze.
Someone did ask about assessment.
There's a whole one
of open assignments.
I'll go find it. I don't know where it is, but
I'll try to think.
Was that in her keynote or yours?
That was in mine.
Yeah, that's exactly. She wasn't here, but she watched it yesterday.
To talk with you about that. When
I saw you mention it, but I tweeted, "I'm here."
I just want to say about something about the three of you, which is not common. Okay, all of you contextualize your keynotes very much to Amical. All of you made the keynote accessible to someone who was totally new to this, but still added depth to someone who, like me, who's been in this for a while. And that's such a difficult line. And I just really appreciate it, because there are a lot of people who come to these kinds of things and they come with whatever their context and they just throw it at everyone. Or they're too derogatory and trying to go all the way down, and none of you did that.
And the really good thing is also Amical participants that come, a lot of them have been here for years. Like they keep coming back to Amical, and there's so many first timers
this time. Yeah.
And so I think that's why this is important, because for those people that have been hearing about this and talking about it and doing a lot of it from before, and also the new ones, because Amical could be a little overwhelming for people because a lot of people hang out in cliques and it's just sometimes overwhelming. So content-wise, if it's too advanced, some people could like even more overwhelmed and have it as an experience not be very beautiful. So I would like to add that. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I found it really interesting to try to get out of I'm at an R1, a 4-year plus graduate university, and we're just catching the notes on the right-hand side.
I have no chance of reading that from here. Just
but I found it really challenging to try to get out of the research university mindset and think about how does liberal arts connect with open. And a lot of my talk was centered around trying to realize the freedom that openness affords us and what do we do with that freedom. So I didn't talk. I don't think I talked at all about cost.
You must have. I'm trying to remember.
You did mention it, but not only.
Right.
Yeah, not overly.
No. I very much wanted to connect with the liberal arts ethos of exploration and discovery and learning and inquiry, and so yeah, it was that was a big challenge.
I enjoyed that part of your talk as someone who's worked and educated at liberal arts institutions, and actually also by training a librarian, although now apostate. My career has taken a different path, but I thought, and actually I thought that there was something to plumb there in the relationship of kind of liberal arts values and professional values. In different contexts. And the professional values of librarianship are relatively I mean, they're debated, but they're relatively codified as being within an area. And I'd certainly love to hear folks from other professional programs talking about to what extent that's true or not in their areas.
That section got cut.
Yeah, that can be your next one. I'll have you and Robin and Cheryl too.
They are so cool, the three of them together. I think this was one of the few times where
I'm like only 50% kidding.
I want to do OE Global. Let's do OE Global.
I just want to respond to Ken and say, Ken, if you want to use any of my stuff, just call my publicist. Everything is openly licensed, and the open license is on the About page of my site. The thing that's copyrighted down at the bottom is the
website, probably.
Yeah, it's like the template for the frame. But the open license is on the About page, and it says this goes with everything.
You need to put that.
I totally assume that, Robin. It's interesting because that has to do with a bit about accessibility. Is people might not find that, and some of our sites have that, and I had that up for a while as an accident, and I was thinking about.
I don't know if I can, or maybe someone with a little more talent than me can find a way to go.
We should talk, because you made a point about it with Audrey's site, and Audrey's site is as copyright as well, even though, and so there's this whole kind of, is it closed or is it open? So I didn't want to call you out on it in live before.
Well, the copyright by itself wouldn't be a
Right.
problem. I mean, you just want to make sure that license. Sometimes when I do something, like if I write something larger that is significant or whatever, I'll drop it right on the bottom of that thing if it's getting shared a lot.
Interesting.
I'll usually try to copy it
I
over
sometimes
again,
put
but-
CC BY on my hypothesis annotations because I want to blog about it later. Because hypothesis annotations are by default CC 0. And to me, this
Are
is
they?
a problem.
Oh.
If I was annotating one of Cheryl's articles, and I had a lot of annotations that I was later going to convert into a blog post or a peer-reviewed article. Putting it on hypothesis means that someone else could just curate them, never reference me.
Interesting.
Right?
Interesting.
And I'm
I
like,
didn't know
why
that
did you
either.
guys do that? I love hypothesis, but why did you guys do that? They're like, oh, it was easier than
What's
CC BY. I'm like,
Twitter?
what?
Is that what is
I think Twitter's in copyright.
Really? I think
copyrights?
Twitter can do whatever they want with it. I think.
Well,
Yeah,
Twitter's
to read the
not
terms and
there,
conditions.
but like
Yeah.
I couldn't use yours and say it was mine.
Right.
Yeah. I'm
Sorry for the distraction, Robin. I was thinking deeply about the way Audrey pushed back on the hypothesis.
Yeah,
And then you made a point that the right way is I can just get a copy and I can put it somewhere and I can make my notes, or technically I could put it on my blog and then
That's
make
what Audrey
my
said.
analysis of
She's
her
repeating-
work.
She's repeating what Audrey said. It's just that people gave Audrey a lot of pushbacks. They didn't read
Yep.
clearly what she
And I
said.
agree with it. I agree with it. But then if I'm just like not as deeply knowledgeable about CC as many of us are, and I'm looking at your post or her post or someone else's post, I go, oh, it's completely copyright. I can't do that with this. If they don't get where to look. So I've got some gears turning around in my head about how to make that more visible for people and my own site as well.
Yeah, because I sort of think there's a good group of people who don't know anything at all about what we're talking about. And then I think the people who do know a lot about what we're talking about are always confused. Because there's always other
Right.
things that are
There's
confusing.
a lot of nuance. I mean, even
Yeah.
what we talked about was, I don't consider things that have a no derivatives license to be OER because you can't modify them. And you said, well, there's a place for those. And yeah, there's a place for those. So how do we look at the whole range of what's there and what you can do with it? And that's part of why in my talk I said, well, let's talk about what you mean by open, because it means so many different things.
And God help you if you get into the NCSA
Yes.
debates,
Yeah.
because then the more you know, definitely the more confused you
Yeah.
are.
Well, we went on this entire Rebus community office hour, you and I, talking about
Oh, believe
this.
me, I ended up
I
far
went,
more confused.
I
than
went through the
was.
I went through the Creative Commons certification.
Yeah.
And I think I confused everybody else.
Yeah. Whereas in the old days when I was first learning, I was like, oh, non-commercial, now money. You know, you're like,
Nice and
"That's
easy."
simple."
Yeah.
But it does get complicated. But I think I always go back to like somebody like Nate Angel or whatever, talking about really the complications are less legal. Like I'm less interested in the sort of legal complications than I am in the ethical and sort of community complications. So when I say NC or when I say SA, what am I trying to build? You know, what am I trying to gesture towards?
What are you advocating?
What am I advocating? And I don't particularly care what the answer is for the court. I'm more interested in, you know, how do I express my hope for what this, you know, process
And I
will
think
do.
there's something you said, and I think we were talking about it yesterday, I can't remember with who, where you said, when it's a substantial piece, I will put a different license on it. And I think this idea that one license is always better than other, I think it's a contextual thing. Depends on who you are, what you've done, how much effort is in it, the probability that someone might steal it or commercialize it or whatever. These things differ. So I don't know why we ever have this discussion without that context.
I might include the nature of the content, which is something I was thinking about while I was watching Anita's keynote, which I will finish. But you know, when I put pictures of my family online, I don't want to put those on a CC BY. Because there's another person implicated, and those should, you know, and currently in this regime, copyright is the one where we've got. There's really neat stuff happening, which I imagine Cheryl probably knows about, and maybe everybody knows about, in the Creative Commons license community, trying to rectify holes in metadata, or at least if not fix them, at least say we don't actually know who the speaker is because the person who took this tape didn't write that down, or to talk about the nature of, I know that this has been working with indigenous communities, saying, well, this is a religious song. We use this in certain ways, and we want your use of it in future to be cognizant of that. I think we're entering a really interesting and much more complicated area of.
Talking about the TK licenses?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, I think that's amazing.
Yeah, but it's amazing stuff to say that maybe it's even bigger than commercial intellectual property rights.
Yeah.
And kind of default.
Different considerations. Yeah. Okay, I only have like 3 more minutes to go, and I want to hug these people. So do you guys have any more things you want to ask them or comments that you want to make? I'm sorry we started late.
I'm glad we got to meet with you. Yeah, I want to be cognizant of time. Anybody?
Hi, Hattie. Oh, we want to say hi.
Hattie, can you hear me now?
Yay.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
Hattie just left. She needs a change in a nap, so she just left. But she says bye.
Terry, me too. Well, just I mean a nap.
Oh.
I haven't had a chance to check all the keynotes out, but I can't wait to check them out.
Great.
Thanks for visiting, you guys.
Oh, thanks so much.
Great seeing you all.
Thanks
Thank
everybody
you so
at
much.
AUC for making this happen for us.
You guys can keep going if you want. We'll go, and then if you guys have a few more minutes, you want to chat about something else.
Okay, sure.
Bye.
Have a great travel
everybody.
day. Tour day.
Bye.
Well, any closing thoughts from our virtual stuff for folks, or are we?
Yeah, I put like a side comment there about that because I just noticed it and I didn't want to call it Robin Online Live.
Right.
But you did.
But now I'm thinking about it, and when we talk about how people that aren't well versed in this, how do they grok CC and everything else? It becomes important, and when people see those all rights reserved, they immediately think, no, I can't use this. So I think we need to do some conscious thinking ourselves about how to do it. Now I'm thinking, oh, I better go to my site and make sure what it says. I think I know what it says because I just switched to Known instead of WordPress. But I didn't. I wanted to make sure I didn't call her out because I might have missed a conversation where she talked about this and said, I've decided to move over here because something related to Audrey. So yeah, it was in my head.
Yeah, and it's far too common, Ken, not just in like personal blogs, but also I noticed in like a lot of those free stuff out there where faculty come to me, Regina, this looks like copyrighted, but it has like in the about, it has like,
What does it mean?
a disclaimer, something that says you can freely use this for whatever purpose. So is this an OER? And so then I may have to reinterpret what that permission looks like. So because it's explicit, yeah.
And you and Joe will know way more about this than I do.
Yeah, but it takes a lot of digging. You know? It doesn't come natural because it's not there, and you have to dig. Sometimes it's like 10 clicks down.
Yep.
So,
and that's not accessible. So yeah. Now this is that filter is going to be on everything. I'm looking at the virtually connecting posts. Now I'm looking at everything in this spectacle.
Yeah. Well, I think I guess one of my longstanding concerns about Creative Commons, as useful as it is to make this documentation, and I think Ken's right to say we're privileging a form of accessibility. I wonder to what extent it reduces people's ability to familiarity with the real concepts of fair use. That and you know what worries me the most is that is bad understandings of fair use. Well, I'm a college professor, so by definition, everything I do is fair use. Like, no, I wish. But you know, I would like. It's been interesting in particularly in dealing with classes, how my faculty members are going to the accessible solution which I think is terrific because it allows them to have a more engaged, open pedagogical product at the end. To say, use Creative Commons or public domain material, and then we can republish it and we don't have to think about it really hard. Because we're supposed to be thinking about the subject matter really hard, and I get it, and it makes sense. And at the same time, it means that the work that I used to do to explain the 4-factor fair use test in America has been sidelined. And again, that, in a way, if we think about that as a content choice for the course, it's an interesting problem.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, thank you for letting me monologue on that.
No. I'm just,
No.
yeah, I got to go back and listen to Robin's keynote as well as the other keynotes as well. It's just, it's been a weird weekend.
Yeah.
And these are deep thoughts to go into. And I wanted to hear Terry as well, so I wanted to make sure that.
Yeah.
Because your mic was super mega low, and I forgot to tell you before we went live. Sorry.
I think it was Hattie.
Don't blame it on Hattie.
Yep.
Yeah, so next week we'll be in no, not next week. I'm leaving on Friday for OER 19. So virtually connecting there.
Mm-hmm.
No,
Good
online,
plug.
not virtually. So we'll be in one session. So hope to see you.
Good
Yeah,
plug,
that's up on the
Regina.
site.
Yeah.
If people are watching and are watching this later, that is up on the Virtually Connecting site, the OER 19, April 10th, 11th.
Yes. Yay.
Wonderful. I hope to see you again there.
Yes. Hope to see you there. I think we'll be with Martin, Sarah, Jamison. Yeah, that session.
It looks good. It looks good. We've got like five sessions planned.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be busy. Wonderful.
Yay.
Well, shall we?
Okay. Well, thank you, Joe, for your time setting this
Sure.
up today.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thanks, Joe.
everyone. I'm going to stop the broadcast. This is Virtually Connecting signing off.